Jesus teaches in parables. The sun hung low on the horizon as Jesus emerged from the house, the warmth of the day still lingering in the air. The sound of waves lapping gently against the shore filled the space around him. Nearby, the sea stretched out endlessly, a mirror reflecting the soft hues of the sky. The people were already gathering, their voices a gentle hum as they pressed closer, eager to hear him speak. The crowd grew so large that it became impossible for Jesus to stand among them. He climbed into a small boat tethered at the water's edge, his robes catching the golden light as he settled onto its wooden bench. Pushing off slightly from the shore, he sat facing the multitude standing along the beach. The gentle rocking of the boat steadied, and a quiet expectancy fell over the crowd. Then Jesus began to speak, his voice carrying over the water, weaving a picture with his words. "Behold, the sower went out to sow," he said, his tone vivid as if painting the image before their eyes. The people imagined the farmer, his hands full of seeds, striding confidently into the field, the bag on his hip rustling with movement. He cast the seeds far and wide, the arc of his throw full of promise and intention. "And as he sowed," Jesus continued, "some seeds fell beside the road, and the birds came and ate them up." The crowd could picture it, the hard, beaten path where the seeds lay exposed, vulnerable to the flurry of wings as birds swooped down to feast. A murmur of recognition rippled through them. They knew how quickly such seeds would disappear, never given a chance to grow. "Others fell on the rocky places," he said, his voice steady, "where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, because they had no depth of soil." The image shifted in their minds, the seeds sprouting quickly among the stones. At first, there was excitement, life bursting forth against the odds. "But when the sun had risen," he continued, "they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away." The crowd felt the sting of disappointment, imagining the tender plants wilting under the relentless heat. "Others fell among the thorns," Jesus said, his voice carrying a note of warning, "and the thorns came up and choked them out." The crowd envisioned the struggle of the young plants, their fragile stems suffocated by the brambles that overtook them, stealing their chance to thrive. "But others," he said, his tone lifting with hope, "fell on the good soil and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. His words painted a picture of abundance, a field bursting with life, the golden heads of grain swaying in the breeze, a harvest beyond measure. He paused, letting the images sink into the hearts of those gathered, each one reflecting on the meaning beneath the surface of the story. The silence stretched for a moment, broken only by the gentle sound of the waves. Then, with a voice both firm and inviting, Jesus concluded, "He who has ears, let him hear." The crowd stood still, some nodding in understanding, others furrowing their brows in thought. Jesus' parable, though simple in its imagery, carried layers of meaning. It spoke to the condition of their hearts, the readiness of their spirits to receive the truth he sowed. As they lingered on the shoreline, his words lingered in their minds, a seed planted deep, waiting to grow. An explanation. As the day wore on, the sun casting golden reflections on the sea, Jesus finished speaking his parable to the vast crowd on the shore. The disciples, gathered closely around him in the boat, exchanged puzzled glances. The parable of the sower lingered in their minds, vivid yet mysterious. When the crowd had dispersed, they leaned toward him, their curiosity leading them to ask, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" Jesus turned his gaze toward them, his expression a mix of patience and understanding. His words, though spoken gently, carried profound depth. "To you," he began, "it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been granted." The disciples listened closely, their brows furrowing as they sought to understand. Jesus continued, explaining the nature of spiritual receptiveness. "For whoever has, to him more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him." His words highlighted the richness of an open heart, the way faith begets understanding, and resistance closes the door to truth. He shifted slightly, glancing toward the shore, where the crowd had stood not long before. "Therefore I speak to them in parables," he said, "because while seeing they do not see, and while hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand." His tone carried a touch of sorrow, a reflection of his desire for them to perceive, and their reluctance to open their hearts. The disciples watched as his expression grew more contemplative, his voice taking on a solemn tone. "In their case," he said, "the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says, 'You will keep on hearing, but will not understand. You will keep on seeing, but will not perceive. For the heart of this people has become dull. With their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they would see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their heart in return, and I would heal them.'" Jesus' words painted a picture of spiritual blindness, a people whose hearts had grown calloused, unable to receive the healing truth he offered. The disciples were silent, the weight of the prophecy settling over them like a cloud. But then, as if casting a light into the heaviness, Jesus turned back to them, his tone lifting with encouragement. "But blessed are your eyes, because they see, and your ears, because they hear." The disciples felt a warm stir within them, a recognition of the privilege they had been given. They were witnesses to something extraordinary, something generations had longed for but never experienced. "For truly I say to you," Jesus continued, his voice filled with certainty, "that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it." The disciples' hearts swelled as they absorbed his words. They realized that what they were experiencing, the teachings, the miracles, the presence of the Messiah, was a gift beyond measure. It was a fulfillment of centuries of longing, the culmination of promises spoken by the prophets of old. As they sat there in the boat, with the water gently rocking beneath them, and the horizon stretching wide, they felt the profound weight of their calling. The mysteries of the kingdom of heaven were being unveiled before their very eyes, and they were called not just to see and hear, but to carry the truth to the world. It was a moment that would shape their understanding forever, a reminder that faith and openness were the keys to unlocking the treasures of the kingdom. The sower explained. As the disciples sat around Jesus, the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, he leaned forward, his gaze steady and full of purpose. The parable he had shared with the crowds lingered in their minds. The sower, the seeds, the soils, each detail vivid, yet its meaning just out of reach. Now, in the stillness of the evening, he began to explain, his words drawing them into a deeper understanding. "Hear then the parable of the sower," Jesus said, his voice calm and filled with an almost tender urgency. "When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart." The disciples envisioned the seeds scattered on the hardened road, exposed and vulnerable. He continued, "This is the one on whom seed was sown beside the road." They saw it clearly now, the hardened heart, resistant to the truth, where the seeds of the kingdom could find no place to take root. "The one on whom seed was sown on the rocky places," Jesus said, shifting their focus. "This is the man who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy." The disciples imagined the excitement and hope of such a response, but Jesus' tone turned sober. "Yet he has no firm root in himself, but is only temporary, and when affliction or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he falls away." They pictured the rocky ground, where the soil was too shallow for the roots to hold. The once hopeful plant withered under the heat of the sun, unable to endure the trials it faced. "And the one on whom seed was sown among the thorns," Jesus continued, his tone steady but filled with meaning. This is the man who hears the word, and the worry of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. The disciples could see it, the young plant struggling to grow, its fragile stem smothered by the thorns. The distractions of life, the lure of riches, the overwhelming cares of the world all strangling its potential. But the one on whom seed was sown on the good soil, Jesus said, his voice lifting with hope. This is the man who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and brings forth, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. The disciples pictured the fertile ground, rich and ready to receive the seed. They imagined the harvest, abundant, overflowing, a testament to the power of a heart that not only listens, but truly embraces the message of the kingdom. As his words settled over them, the disciples began to grasp the depth of the parable. It was not just about a farmer or seeds. It was about the state of the human heart. Each type of soil represented a response to the word of the kingdom, a reflection of the way people would receive or reject the truth. The rocky places and thorn-choked ground spoke to the struggles they had seen and would continue to encounter as they followed Jesus. Yet the good soil reminded them of the hope that lay ahead, the lives transformed, the fruit that would be born in abundance when the message of the kingdom took root. In the fading light, the disciples sat quietly, their hearts stirred. They understood now that the sower's work required both patience and faith. Not every seed would flourish, but the seeds that found good soil would yield a harvest beyond measure. Jesus' words were a call to tend their own hearts and to continue sowing, trusting that the kingdom of heaven would grow in ways they could not yet fully see. And as the seed gently lapped at the shore, the disciples felt the weight of their mission. They were not just hearers of the word, they were sowers, entrusted to scatter the seeds of the kingdom across the fields of the world, trusting God to bring forth the harvest. Tares among wheat. In a peaceful countryside, a diligent landowner walked the length of his expansive field, sowing good seed with care and intention. The soil was rich, the weather favorable, and the promise of a bountiful harvest filled him with satisfaction. His servants worked alongside him, tending to the field with devotion. When evening fell and the day's labor was done, the workers rested, leaving the field to the quiet of the night. But in the stillness of the dark, an enemy crept onto the land, unseen and with malicious intent. Moving stealthily among the rows of newly sown seed, he scattered tares, weeds that would grow among the wheat and threaten the crop. Satisfied with his work of sabotage, the enemy slipped away, leaving the field to its fate. Days turned into weeks, and the seeds began to sprout. The landowner's heart swelled with pride as he observed the green shoots emerging from the soil. But as the wheat began to grow and bear grain, the servants noticed something troubling. Intertwined among the golden stalks of wheat were tares, plants that mimicked the wheat in appearance, but would yield nothing of value. Alarmed, the servants hurried to the landowner. "Sir," they said, their voices filled with concern, "did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares?" The landowner's face darkened as understanding dawned. "An enemy has done this," he replied, his voice steady but firm. The servants, eager to rectify the situation, asked, "Do you want us, then, to go and gather them up?" But the landowner shook his head. "No," he said, his tone resolute. "For while you are gathering up the tares, you may uproot the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest. At the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, 'First gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheat into my barn.'" The servants nodded, understanding the wisdom of his decision. Though the sight of the tares among the wheat was disheartening, they trusted in the landowner's plan. They continued to tend the field, patiently waiting for the day of the harvest. And so the wheat and the tares grew side by side under the same sun and rain, their differences indistinguishable to many. But the landowner knew that the harvest would reveal all, that the true wheat, bearing good grain, would be gathered into his barn, while the tares would meet their fiery end. Jesus paused as he finished the parable, letting the imagery sink into the minds of those who listened. The disciples, seated close to him, could feel the weight of the story's meaning. They understood that the field represented the world, the good seed were the children of the kingdom, and the tares were the influence of the evil one. The parable spoke of patience and the wisdom of God, who allowed both good and evil to exist side by side for a time, knowing that the ultimate day of reckoning would come. It was a message of hope and justice, a promise that though the enemy may work in secret, the harvest would reveal all. As the disciples pondered the story, they felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to stand firm and grow as wheat in the field of the kingdom, awaiting the day when the harvest would come. And in the heart of the crowd, the parable left an indelible mark, its truth reaching those who were ready to hear it.